And the Mexican ambassador to India, he's spoken to India today, is Maha Siddiqui. He's reiterated Mexico's pro-India stance. The envoy has said Mexico is committed to support India's bid for the nuclear suppliers group. He said it's very important for India to be on board.
For the concerns of Mexico initially, and how was it brought on board? You are supporting India now at the NSG, I believe.
We have had an engagement with India already since 2008. India has worked in the group for a long time now. We have been bringing the issues that we have a problem with India already. We are a society that believes in the civil use of nuclear energy. We are the signatories and the promoters of something that is called the Tlatelolco Treaty to keep Latin America nuclear free. So we come from an area of the world that nuclear has to be and has to have civil uses. So our agenda with India is an agenda that is a positive agenda with a non-proliferation content, a very big and important, strong content of non-proliferation. And those are the things that we want India seeing.
Does Mexico believe that having India on board the NSG will strengthen non-proliferation across the globe?
No, we believe it will strengthen India's non-proliferation agenda, and that's what we're working for.
China has raised a concern about India not being a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Was that a concern Mexico had in the past? Is it over now?
It is always a concern. We would want to see every country signing that agreement.
Even now, but despite the fact that you are supporting India's NSG bid?
One thing is one thing and the other thing is the other thing. The signature of a treaty that has been in the UN for such a long time, that is good for the people of the world, that is a non-proliferation and a non-use of nuclear energy as it was in the past in war. It's a good agenda for anybody, not only for the ones that are NSG group.
If India is allowed entry into the NSG, and we are hoping for the best, there's cautious optimism here in India, even as the plenary starts. Do you believe that it will open the door for other non-NPT entities as well? At least the NSG will have to look into their applications as well?
Yes, it will have to. You cannot have a discriminatory policy in NSG. So if we are opening the door, we have to look into other options.
Does that mean Pakistan?
I don't know what it means. It means whoever comes and knocks the door. Today we're talking about India.
So let's now talk about the major developments that are taking place. So India's case is to be taken up at 9 p.m. Seoul time. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent, would be speaking to the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, there are other developments that are taking place. There was this trade meet, finance secretaries meeting in China, in Beijing. That is now not going to take place for some time. Why? I want to quickly cut across to Beijing and bring in India today's Anant Krishnan for more on this. Anant, what's the latest? Why is this meet not happening? Why has it been deferred?
Well, Gaurav, it's really curious. Finance Minister Arun Jaitely has arrived in Beijing today, and tomorrow morning he's chairing a big investment summit, which is going on as planned. But as of yesterday, one of the key highlights of his visit was to be a financial dialogue on Monday. But this morning it sort of emerged that this was going to be postponed by possibly a month. They're careful to say it hasn't been cancelled, but postponed. The reason that was given in Delhi by official sources was that because an official couldn't travel. But that's slightly hard to believe in this because, as you know, we've all expected the Brexit announcement to happen today.
Yes.
As far as we were concerned in Beijing, even yesterday the dialogue was supposed to go ahead. So it's very interesting that it raises the prospect of whether India is sending a message to China that the NSG issue is something that's a core interest of India's. And it sort of questions the statement that Beijing put out today, that they saw the NSG issue as having nothing to do with bilateral relations, and they felt that it wouldn't have a negative impact on bilateral relations. But going back to the main issue of tonight's plenary, Gaurav, just a quick point that Chinese officials are still saying that they see that the NSG members are still divided on the issue. They don't see eye to eye on the issues, so they don't feel they're isolated right now. So I don't think they've come to a point where they feel the pressure that it's 47 versus 1. which
Okay.
might lead to a change in their position.
Okay, so we'll wait and watch because lots happening even as we speak. But Jaidev Ranade, what do you make of these latest developments? Is India trying to send out a signal here, sir?
Well, I think there are two things here. One is I tend to agree with what Anand Krishnan said, that the timing suggests certainly that we are linking up the issues and sending a message to China that it is not going to be business as usual if they don't back us this time round, or withdraw their opposition, should I say. The second is, I think Prime Minister Modi will certainly raise it with Xi Jinping, who has the clout to withdraw the objections, as it were,
Okay.
or withdraw the opposition. They can also try and work out some kind of a compromise formula. But in any case, if Xi Jinping does not accede to Mr. Modi's request, China's own intention will be very clear, and we would know exactly where we stand with them. So I think
absolutely.
that is going to be the way things are going to move forward.
Dhruv, this very clearly sends a signal.
Who, possibly Foreign Secretary and all are working on.
Yes, this very clearly sends a signal who's with India and who's not with India, because this is a very just cause. India wants to be on the nuclear high table. This is an idea whose time has come. India has energy requirements, 40% non-fossil fuel by 2030, 10% of it nuclear energy is the dream. So why would China want to block something like this, unless China wants to block India's development?
Plus there is no.
I mean, I think that's the point. That's the point to stress, which is that.
Yes, Dhruv. Go on, Dhruv.
I think that's the point to stress, which is India's development is actually something that China could benefit from. So I think that there are a lot of positive things that Prime Minister Modi could be stressing also with Xi Jinping when he meets with him this afternoon. And if China is to successfully rebalance its economy, and that's a big part of Xi Jinping's domestic transformation agenda for China, India actually will have to be a partner in that process. India would be an export destination and a bigger trade partner for China as it rebalances its economy. There's a lot of institutional cooperation that goes on between India and China on climate change, on international financing. India is the second largest stakeholder in the AIIB,
yes.
Which is a China-led the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. India is now becoming a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the reason for Prime Minister Modi's visit to Tashkent. So there's a level of institutional cooperation between India and China. There's a level of economic and commercial cooperation that is certainly possible and certainly is in China's interest. And there's also a security dimension to the relationship as well. And I think it would, as I've stressed, I think China's resistance to India at the NSG may upset the security balance as well a little bit in the region. Certainly public perceptions of China within India will harden. So for all of these reasons, I think that there's a good case can be made by India to China that this is not something that China should be resisting, that this matters a lot more to India NSG than it does to China. So I think that yes, should be the message that should be sent, and I hope is being sent.
Dr. Alka Acharya, does this kind of indicate that China read India incorrectly when China said that whatever happens at NSG, it will not affect bilateral ties, because indications are it may not be business as usual if China hampers India's development path?
No, I really would not like to put it like that. I think it has taken a lot of effort on the part of both countries to put these different dimensions of the India-China relationship along different trajectories. The mechanisms have been set up to address different issues, and I think India would not, I really believe that India would not like to link all its other aspects of its relationship with China with this issue. I think the foreign minister's press conference made it quite clear that they were hoping for a constructive response from China, and that they were willing to even go to the extent of not putting an obstacle for Pakistan. Now, if that is not keeping your tracks separate, I don't know what is. So I would not read this as an attempt by India to threaten China with no business Because I don't know whom
nobody's
it is
talking
going
about no
to affect
business.
more.
We're just talking about
So
vitiating
we
the
should
environment.
be cautious.
Isn't China vitiating the environment? Why would China
If you're
object to
saying,
India's growth trajectory?
Your point. Your point was that we are hinting to China that it's not going to be business as usual. I think that's where we are not. I would disagree with that. However, yes. Now, the second point is that by taking the stand that China is taking, is China really, I mean, would you take it to the point where you're saying that it is standing in the way of India's development? I don't think the two are linked at all.
Why not?
Yes, there are power dynamics. Yes, there is a question of the way, why not? Because after all, this the fact that we have to want to set up civil nuclear energy and so on and so forth, I mean, we can still do that if we want to. The question is that there are other hurdles in the process which have nothing to do with NSG membership. So I'm not opposing the fact that we should make as strong a pitch for this as possible, that we should, on the strength of our credentials, make an argument. All that is in its own place. But what I am really concerned about is that the way in which this discourse is going to make a kind of a judgment on the entire state of India-China relationship, or the fact
let
that
me get
its
Commodore
future
Uday
is going
Bhaskar.
to be
Let me get
affected
Commodore Uday
by the
Bhaskar
fact
to react
that
to this. Is China's opposition principled, or does China want to stall India's growth story, Commodore Bhaskar, by putting a spoke in India's NSG push?
Well, I think, Gaurav, if one wants to use the word principled, perhaps we have to introduce a slightly malleable kind of definition or interpretation, and say that to the extent that China is committed to the principle of keeping India in some kind of disequilibrium as far as the strategic and security domain is concerned, then I think they are being consistent. Because I have a slightly different interpretation of China and its orientation on the nuclear issue, which is going back to May 1998 to where we are now.
Yes.
There's been a sense of not acknowledging India's nuclear profile. There have been occasions when China has been both disdainful and disparaging, and this has continued. We saw some elements of this in 2008 when the NSG had accorded the exceptional status to India. And even now, as we'd said earlier, there is no single point of merit that could be pursued with any kind of logic, whether it is about being a signatory to the NPT or India's track record as far as non-proliferation is concerned, or the way in which India, I think, has exercised nuclear restraint.
And on the other hand,
therefore
and
the
you know,
suggestion-
China is campaigning for Pakistan, and the whole world knows what is Pakistan's track record. So where are principles and China on that front, Jaydev Ranade?
Well, China is the one which has worked with Pakistan. It's worked under the radar, in fact, to equip them with missiles and missile technology, with nuclear power plants and nuclear technology. It fixed up a clandestine brokerage, brokered a clandestine deal between North Korea and Pakistan. And it is now, as I said, elevated its relationship with Pakistan to even a higher level. So Pakistani scientists have been traveling all over selling nuclear technology to a third country. I think that is documented all over the world, and they are also looking at radicalization of the Pakistani society, Islamic radicalization, which is another factor that is worrying everyone. India has none of these. It has never violated non-proliferation norms. It has never indulged in any such renegade activity. So I think our track record is clear, and China just chooses not to see it. That's all.
And China wants to ensure that India's rise, and that's the question that we are coming to. Does China want to ensure that India doesn't rise to be a superpower in this region? The US wants it, Russia seems to want it, other countries seem to want it. Does China want to stall it? Why is China stalling India's growth? My colleague Devinath joins us with more. Devinath, take it away.
Thanks, Gaurav. We know about the string of pearls diplomacy that China has been trying to employ for a long time around the Indian Ocean to corner India, starting with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and as well as Pakistan. Now, we've narrowed down 5 reasons to why is China so jittery. Now, remember, China is seeing a slowdown in its economy at this point of time, and India is on the rise. And that's why reason number 1, China is staunchly opposing India's entry into the 48-member elite NSG club, because that would mean that India gains more in nuclear trade. It also gains more in terms of rising in the world status. Also, China wants to restrict India's global rise, and that's why China is jittery ahead of the NSG plenary meet. We've already seen the support that's been pouring in for India, including the states which has come on board. The third reason that we see is China is aware that the nuclear trade will boost India's revenues as well. We've already seen that how the French and the Russian companies are lining up to take away the nuclear trade in the country. Reason 4 is India has also spotless non-proliferation record. So the NPT excuse actually is what China is banking on out of its own jitters for India's global rise, and India's NSG entry will diminish Chinese power. There's no doubt about it. That dragon right now is cowering down. It's time for the tiger to rise.
It's time for the tiger to rise, but is the dragon trying to stall it? Anant, you're in Beijing. What's the sentiment in Beijing like? Do they want to stall India's growth? Because as far as economies are concerned, a short while back, Dhruv was saying it'll be a great idea if the two economies are aligned. It's good for China, it's good for India. Why would China want to stall India's growth? Is it just Pakistan or are there other reasons?
Well, Gaurav, I'm not so sure as if you can say that the NSG issue reflects a larger Chinese policy to stop India's rise in other fields. I think as Dhruv and as Professor Acharya mentioned as well, there's a lot that's going on in the relationship in different ways which might question that narrative. But as far as the NSG is concerned, I think that it's very difficult to deny that this logic of between India and Pakistan is something that has been driving China when it comes to nuclear issues, and that goes back to 2005 and 2008. A year after the India-US deal was given a waiver, China sold 2 reactors to Pakistan, which went against NSG commitments. In this instance, China can't do that on its own because this is something that the NSG is deciding as a whole. Which is why I think China's prime motive is to ensure that the door is open for Pakistan if India is allowed entry first. So I think it's more about parity between India and Pakistan, which China sees as its interest, rather than a more general thing of trying to keep India's rise down in every other field. So I see this as an NSG specific issue in many ways.
Okay, but does India also see it just as NSG specific, or do we see a bigger design? We'll talk about this in greater detail, but there's more breaking news coming in. India's NSG bid is to be discussed at 9 tonight. This will be discussed after Japan raised the issue at the nuclear suppliers group. What we're also being told that in a short while from now, anytime now, there is that all-important meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Pakistan's President Xi Jinping. What is it that Prime Minister Narendra Modi can tell the Chinese president to get China either on board or to water down its opposition? What's the road ahead? That is the big question we are raising here. With me is Jaydev Ranade, former Additional Secretary of the Research and Analysis Wing. With me is also Uday Bhaskar, a man who understands China very well. Dr. Alka Acharya studies China very closely. Dhruv Jaishankar of Brookings Institute. But what is it that India can tell China? Is there something, Commodore Bhaskar, that India can tell China to get China on board in this meeting that will take place in a while from now?
Well, I think at the summit level, in a few minutes from now, we are going to have this interaction between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. And I think the normative issues, the areas where there is a common interest for India and China, and the fact that there is a contradictory tenor in the relationship wherein India and China do engage, do cooperate, economic, trade, climate and other issues, And the one area of dissonance is the strategic and the security domain, particularly in relation to Pakistan. And Prime Minister Modi has been known in the past to speak with great candor with the Chinese president. You will recall that when President Xi Jinping visited here,
Yes.
and he was in Gujarat, Ahmedabad, we did have a very serious security challenge that came up as far as the movement of PLA troops was concerned. And if you, again, my recall is that it was handled with a certain degree both of determination, and enough space was given to the Chinese to be able to find their own way of dealing with it. So I think in Tashkent this is going to be perhaps the subtext. Does China want to be isolated as far as the nuclear issue is concerned when there is a very serious security challenge? I mean, we haven't spoken about AQ Khan explicitly,
Yes.
but what AQ Khan and the network represents, and Pakistan's own contribution in abetting both radical ideologies and terror, is the worst case scenario for the entire global community.
Oh,
And I think on
absolutely.
this issue, Prime Minister Modi has been very, very consistent in drawing attention and flagging this to the global community. So it will put China in a spot. So I've been thinking for the last couple of days that this is also a test for China. How
Yes.
does it want to project itself in the global committee about quote unquote its responsible characteristics at a time when it has South China Sea also as one of the issues where there is the spotlight
Very
is on
interesting.
it.
Very interesting
And
you say that. Very interesting. It's also a test for China. And Dhruv, you know, when we talk about this personal chemistry between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping, and you know, the visit to Gujarat and the Prime Minister's visit to China, and the personal rapport, does that have a role to play, if at all? Or is this real hard-nosed, tough talking that India can also play hardball, or is that not an option?
No, I mean, I think I would agree with Commodore Bhaskar that Prime Minister Modi has shown an ability to speak candidly to his leaders, but also build up a personal rapport with them. He certainly tried to do that with Xi Jinping in the various summit meetings that where they have interacted. But I think the larger point to make is that, you know, the United States has pursued a policy since 2003-2004 of dehyphenating India and Pakistan, and that means not abandoning relations with Pakistan. The US still has a security partnership with Pakistan, but in fact treating India and Pakistan on their own merits. What we're seeing now is in some ways China trying to rehyphenate India and Pakistan. So arguably never genuinely dehyphenated them. So treating India in the context of Pakistan and vice versa. And I think one of the points to stress that hopefully Prime Minister Modi will be stressing is that, you know, treat India on its own merits, treat Pakistan on its own merits.
Yes.
And keep those two tracks quite separate. So I think hopefully he will be communicating a very blunt message. A very direct message to Xi Jinping, but also I think giving, as Anand Krishnan said, giving them room to China also room to maneuver, so that hopefully that there's a resolution in the next 2 days that is in India's favor and also in favor of the India-China relationship.
Okay, and we're just about to get pictures of the two meeting in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent. Pictures just about to be put on air in a moment from now. The two have just met. But, you know, the fact that we're talking about India and Pakistan, Dr. Acharya, the fact that China can even think of trying to rehyphenate India and Pakistan, given Pakistan's track record when it comes to nuclear proliferation and India's track record, is China being level here, or is China playing games?
As I said, that because China is one of the P5, therefore the kind of stand it takes brings the spotlight more closely on it, and it's taking a stand which is not the same as the others. Nonetheless, I would still repeat that it is not China alone. You just heard the Mexican ambassador on your own channel say that, well, if India comes in, we can't stop Pakistan, we can't stop Israel, we can't stop any country which comes and applies will have to be considered. So the question really is not. No, the question is, no, that's not what the Mexican ambassador also said.
No, because India, India gets into NSG doesn't mean Pakistan automatically gets into NSG. Is that your understanding?
No, that's not what I'm saying, and that's No. That's not what I am saying, and that's not what my sense that the Mexican ambassador was saying. That each country would have to be considered. The application
Sure.
of each country would have to be considered. India is putting a case for merits. It's putting a case for the criteria that they are putting forward is their track record, the fact that they have been impeccable supporters of the regime. They're not. So all this is fine. I mean, the normative content, as they put it, that we are putting a normative argument. However, whether a group like the NSG will seek to only use the normative argument and say that therefore because India is good we'll take it, and because Pakistan is bad we will not, I don't think it will work like that. They will have to at some point or the other consider Pakistan's application. Yes, you may argue that and I think certainly it's very crystal clear that the Chinese have been backing Pakistan throughout. It's no secret, and they have consistently put forward the claims of Pakistan, supported it. So I would, what I'm trying to say is here that let's not demonize countries unnecessarily till such time as the picture is clearer. What we are doing here is making it out to be, of course, China versus the rest of the world, which I'm not sure is the case, and that it's become a contest between India and China, which is also not the case, because if you look at what the External Affairs Minister said, I mean, the diplomatic route has been used very skillfully this time. I think we should push on that, because maximum successes have come here. And therefore, to say that this is only about the India-China contest, or China trying to put India down, or trying to only get Pakistan, I think we are going to then unnecessarily complicate our own case. After all, if India is ready to say, and this is what speculation is, that the Prime Minister is going to say, we will not stand in the way of Pakistan's membership.
Sure,
So if that is not a quid pro quo, what is?
Each
So I think
membership
let's keep the issues
these are
open
the
and
first
not
images.
paint it in such stark colors.
These are the first images that we are putting out of that meeting between India and China. The two the Prime Minister of India and the President of China, Xi Jinping, they've just met. Raj Chingappa, Group Editorial Director, India Today Group, also joins me on the broadcast. Raj, what is it that Prime Minister Narendra Modi can tell Xi Jinping? Can we bring him on board?
Well, I'm sure he's going to try. But I was just listening to the previous, commentator, and clearly we have to play it right. It is not kind of a brazen sort of thing. We need it, we should have it right now, and you better give it to us. It's how you subtly play that. You do mention the importance of it, and I'm sure they're blunt when they speak on one-on-one, but you then position it with all the other interests that you have with China, and tell them, I think they quite rightly have sent some sort of signal by saying that the financial dialogue may be postponed or is going postponed.
What message does that send, Raj, in your opinion?
See, after all, China is now one of our largest trading partners.
Yes.
They have tremendous amount of business interest. The question we are asking them is, are you willing to risk all that for and oppose India on something that there is a broad consensus of? After all, in 2008, when the Nuclear Security Group gave us the clean waiver, it had already acknowledged that we are a responsible nuclear power. We are just taking it to the next level. Look, if we are, and we have demonstrated in these 8 years that you've given us membership, that we've been absolutely responsible, why aren't we moving to the next level, which was the plan right from the beginning when we entered into the Indo-US nuclear deal?
So India is sending out that message when there's a pause on that dialogue, on that finance dialogue, that it's not business as usual.
Correct. I think correctly, I mean, we've also seen the Ministry of External Affairs saying don't demonize China, don't make it seem like it's all there. But at the same time, in diplomacy, I think you have to be both brutal when you want to be on face-to-face,
yes,
but for public purposes, be more nuanced and subtle in the way you go about presenting that message.
Okay. Dr. Acharya, will China get that message, the message that India is hoping to get across?
Now, I have no doubts that they have not just got the message, but the fact that the Prime Minister was received so well in all the capitals that he went and resounding supports, I think China has got the message. The question is really that the position that China is taking, how do we try and get around it? And I see this as a diplomatic challenge, because I really do not see it as one in which we have to necessarily get at loggerheads with China about. We need to discuss, talk, continuously dialogue with them, and keep putting forward our credentials as an impeccable follower of the non-proliferation principles and so on. So why we, while on the one hand, and I think by the argument that was being put forward, that by telling them that we will not be a barrier to any discussion or even the Pakistan membership question, I think we have shown that we are willing to be flexible and accommodating, but at the same time pushing our case very actively internationally. I think this is the best possible combination to be followed.
Okay. So, Dhruv, when you look at this situation, India sent out a message. We are looking at these pictures of the Prime Minister and the Chinese President meeting. The signal that India is sending out that this is important to us. This, we don't need a solution in the next 48 hours, Dhruv. It can be postponed for a couple of months, and that perhaps is the easy way forward, isn't it?
No, I mean, I think that's part of a plan B that will be very difficult to pull off. In fact, the easiest thing for India is if there is a resolution in the next 48 hours, and India's admitted into the NSG as a member, and the case of Pakistan or others is pushed down the road when they actually can submit a credible application. India currently is submitting a credible application, and which is why its case should be addressed right now. I mean, I think if that doesn't happen, and we have what is quite possible is that we don't have a resolution one way or the other in the next 48 hours in Seoul, that we may have to push it back a few months and then see whether the NSG can meet again, perhaps at this level. I mean, one of the things I think to keep in mind, a number of people in the last few days in India have been focusing on the process of the NSG, as if there are rules set in stone about how the group should act and should behave, and there's a process to follow. So I think we're being trapped into thinking about this as a processual issue. In fact, the NSG, I mean, it was a very informal grouping when it first started. It didn't meet for many years. It was, and now when it does meet, it is largely to update the export control list, the nuclear export control list, the dual-use export control list. So it's actually quite a technical agreement, but it's much more informal. So I would just caution against people seeing this as the process is over, that there's no clear resolution in Seoul, and therefore India's case is not being addressed. I think that various creative solutions can be found in the next few months.
Okay, in the next few months, so perhaps not a solution in the next 48 hours. That's the worst case scenario.
Well, I would push for a solution in 48 hours. What will change from now and 3 months in India's approach, or any nation's approach? India has done a lot of heavy lifting on this matter. It has spoken to President Obama, it's spoken to President Putin, it's brought France into the picture, it's really lobbied and done all the work.
Yes.
Why should it start waiting? Because you see, there is a constellation that has come together, a perfect time, It's not a perfect storm, it has created that. But there's a perfect time when you do this. If you lose that momentum, then President Obama is in his last leg of presidency.
Yes.
World concerns keep happening all the time. This just gets delayed further. And then we don't know the outcome the next year on the US presidency. Who's going to be there? Is he going to be as supportive? Because if we recall in 2008, it was President Bush that called up that time Hu Jintao, President of China, and got the thing done. So I think here you've had the heavy lifting. We've expended a lot of capital.
The Prime Minister's made a big push for this. The Prime Minister's made a big push for it. The Ministry of External Affairs, they've worked round the clock. Whether it's the Foreign Secretary as Jai Shankar, whether it's External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj, their entire team, they've worked round the clock. Will this happen? We will continue to track that story very closely. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Tashkent. In Uzbekistan, he is meeting the Chinese President Xi Jinping. These are exclusive pictures we're getting you of that meeting. Raj Chingappa, Group Editorial Director, India Today, with me. Let's try and see if we can listen in, if there's some audio on that video, and let's try and listen into what's happening on ground. Raj, there was a warm handshake, before these visuals we saw a warm handshake, the two met and now they're talking. What is it that India can tell China to get China on board? Because most of the commentators seem to think that, China's not coming on board and this may be different from 2008.
No, I think the right thing to do in any argument is to listen to the other person. rather than think of them as a demon and, having various other motives to stop it. Let us just, for instance, ask China, what is it that bothers them about our membership? And what are their larger concerns? If we have that in mind, and they say, look, we believe that if we allow you in, then the door is sort of open for all other kinds of members, or they are playing a bargaining chip for Pakistan, we can then make our stand clear on that matter. It isn't that we have to yield everything and say, all right, we'll also let Pakistan get into the NSG.
No, but that anyway we do not decide. Pakistan's case will be taken on merit.
No. But if it goes step by step, we get in first.
Exactly.
Right? And then Pakistan's membership comes up, then we will have the veto right just as China has it at the moment.
Yes.
So I think they are trying to jockey on one side to say, let us bring certain criteria, because there might be other members who would want to come on board. And so China has done the maximum and said, you have to be an NPT member. No, quite right. Knowing fully well that that's a maximalist position. So then they would want maybe certain other concessions to be made, or certain riders to come in, or conditionalities put in to various powers, what they call the non-nuclear NPT powers.
So which means it may not happen in the next 48 hours. I mean, overcoming all of this in the next 48 hours.
I mean, if we agree that, for instance, if there are reasonable conditions being put on us, as we did, and not violating the law that we've already passed in Parliament with regard to liability, with regard to how we will interact with the International Atomic Energy Agency and other issues, and all the safeguards that we've taken, we could say, fine, we will do 1, 2, 3, but we are not going to do this, and we reach a compromise. So we need to understand what is the crux of China's objection beyond being this, we are not a nuclear a member of the NPT.
China's opposition is not is China's opposition principled? Do they really want to help their friend Pakistan, or do they want to stall India's rise?
Well, there is multiple factors working at it. There's certainly the fact that we've got closer to the US. So they see some sort of, ring being formed around them, a pincer movement between US, India, Japan and others, which they think they need to show a little aggression on. There is their relations with Pakistan. They've done this huge economic corridor and invested a lot of money in that. So they need to keep that particular part happy. The third, of course, is its relationship with India, which it needs to consider. How much would they want to wager on the NSG membership? How much can they extract from India on various other fronts before they give that concession? So by building it, it's also a negotiating stand.
Yes.
And therefore they would look, obviously China is not going to say, here, take this, without certain things in return. So it would come in business, it could come in other issues, or silence in terms when Pakistan's thing comes. So we need to understand what they are actually pushing. From what we hear is just hearsay, and maybe the spokesperson giving the sort of 2 or 3 points, but we really don't know the full text of the argument.
Yes.
And when I was speaking to President Putin, he actually made this point. He said that we do need to take all those who are objecting, and he said we are in touch with China.
Yes.
And then we need to address that issue and then take a decision. But he was very positive that India would get through.
Okay. So barring China, virtually everyone appears to be positive. There are, of course, countries like Ireland, Turkey, Austria, New Zealand, who appear to be holding out. But sources seem to indicate that there is forward movement. Is there forward movement on China? We'll track that story very closely.